Deep in the water, where the fish hang out, lives a glum, gloomy swimmer with an ever-present pout. I'm a pout-pout fish with a pout-pout face, so I spread the dreary wearies all over the place. Blub, blub, blub. Along comes a clam with a wide-winning grin and a pearl of advice for her pal to take in. Hey, Mr. Fish, with your crosstown frown, don't you think it's time to turn it upside down? Says the fish to his friend, nice thought, Miss Clam. I hear what you're saying, but it's just the way I am. I'm a pout-pout fish with a pout-pout face, so I spread the dreary wearies all over the place. Blub, blub, blub. Along comes a jellyfish. He floats through the ocean, his tentacles all trailing in a gentle locomotion. Hey, Mr. Fish, with your daily scaly scowl, I wish you wouldn't greet us with a grimace and a growl. Says the fish to his friend, Mr. Jelly, I agree. I'd like to be more friendly, but it isn't up to me. I'm a pout-pout fish with a pout-pout face, so I spread the dreary wearies all over the place. Blub, blub, blub. Along comes a squid, quite a slender, squiggly sight. She is squirmy, she is squelchy, she is slightly impolite. Hey, Mr. Fish, you kaleidoscope of a mope, how about a smile? A little joy? A little hope? Says the fish to his friend, Miss Squid, I would try, but I haven't any choice. Take a look and you'll see why. I'm a pout-pout fish with a pout-pout face, so I spread the dreary wearies all over the place. Why don't you say it with me? Blub, blub, blub. Now along comes a fish in a silent silver shimmer. The gang has never seen before this bright and brilliant swimmer. She approaches Mr. Fish, but instead of saying hey, she plants a kiss upon his pout, and then she swims away. Mr. Fish is most astounded. Mr. Fish is just aghast. He is stone-faced like a statue, and then he blinks and speaks at last. My friend, says Mr. Fish, I should have known it all along. I thought that I was pouty, but it turns out I was wrong. I'm a kiss-kiss fish with a kiss-kiss face for spreading cheery cheeries all over the place. So I'll smooch, 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 smooch. That's my daughter's favorite story right now. I don't know why. She doesn't know why, and she won't be able to tell me why when she gets older. She'll deny that it was her favorite story when she gets older. But as funny and ridiculous as some children's stories are to we mature adults, many of them have a good lesson hidden in there somewhere. And this one has a pretty good one and caused me to reflect as I was writing for today. You notice that many people tried to tell the fish to be different. But a change only occurred when someone treated him differently. Many people tried to tell the fish to be different, but the change only occurred when someone treated him differently. It was only when he was loved for who he was, or even what he could be. This is what happened for me at key moments in my life. And we're beginning today a 4-Sunday series called One Time in My Life, where you're going to hear some testimonial-type sermons from your pastors, starting with me. I get to tell you about some lessons that I learned, and then I get to go off on vacation before anybody can hold me accountable. That works. As a child, I was very angry. Really struggled with anger issues. I would slam the door, throw things at my brother sometimes, terrorize my mom. It was a very bad thing. I was very, very angry as a child. Anything could set me off. Now, let me guess what some of you might already be thinking. Not you, Corey. You're so well put together. Well, even if you do actually think that about me, let me tell you that I looked put together back then, too. at church. I had learned early on that when you come to church, you have to put on your best face. And I was good at it. I had people believing that I was put together. My mother knew a very different story. I was angry. So angry, in fact, that she had to seek help for me and put me under the care of a certain Dr. McIntyre, who I visited regularly for about 4 years. And I did what I'm told is called play therapy. Now, what that meant was I went into his office, I think twice a month, I'm not sure, and we did whatever I wanted to do. Now, I remember the first meeting, he brought me in, and of course I was very uncomfortable, I was very shy, and he gave me this padded stick, and he knew I was having anger issues, and he said, whenever you feel angry, you can grab this padded stick and hit the chair with it. I never did because I was never angry with him. I came in and we did whatever I wanted to do. And normally, that was pretending to put on a radio show. I would bring my records, I would bring my tape recorder, and he would play along. There was no one else in my life who would do that. I thought it was silly. I experienced there just complete space. It's the only way I know how to describe it. Complete space, a safe space to be who I was. I experienced grace firsthand. That's what grace looks like. In the presence of grace, you can almost momentarily become a better person, I learned. At least that's what happened with me. I wouldn't have known to call it grace back then, but that's what it was. Don't think that the person beside you has it all put together. Because you know what I've already learned? I hope that many of you have learned it too, since many of you are my elders. I was walking through my neighborhood a couple weeks ago, and I kind of noticed for the first time that all in the same neighborhood, you have like the very well manicured, perfect, flowers everywhere, perfectly maintained house. And just a few lots away, you can have the rundown place with trash in the yard and weeds growing and all of that. And we almost always subconsciously think that rundown house has more problems inside it. Don't we? But I've learned something, and I'm going to put it to you the way one online blogger put it that I love. He said, hell visits high-end homes too. The booze just has a finer label, to put it one way. You can't judge by appearances. The perfect-looking house can have a torn-apart family inside it. And the rundown house can have a close-knit family inside it. We teach kids not to judge by appearances, but I think we do it all our lives. People thought I was put together. Maybe you still think I'm put together. I don't know. In my early teenage years, let's say middle school, I got past some of that, but I became very, very solitary. Any attention that I got was usually bad attention, so I didn't want anybody to notice me. Snuck in, snuck out, didn't really talk to people except for one or two close friends. I didn't want to be noticed. I was picked on. Bullying is still a huge problem today, by the way. I was still picked on. I was picked on back then. I remember one incident, one of those things that gets flashed into your mind. I was pressed up against a wall, and here was this girl who was going to beat me up for something. And surrounded by 20 to 30 of my peers, watching to see what would happen to me. That kind of thing can scar you for, what's today? 20 years. So, I shrunk back. But there were a couple of people in my life that showed me what God is like, showed me grace. They didn't just tell me God loves me, because that means nothing outside of experiencing love. They showed me. I had a youth minister named Jeremy who was one of the few people at church who always smiled at me, always said hi, and always laughed at my attempt at a joke. Laughed whenever I thought I was being funny. Gave me that courtesy. Always talked to me, always asked me how I was doing. Never minded if I popped into his office at any point during the day. And once again, there was space. There was grace. And it made an impact on me. Now, this was about the time when I came into high school. That was around the time when some noticeable positive changes probably started to happen. I'll show you the obligatory picture. Here's me. And you can't see it very well. I'm not going to show you the real thing. No, I'm kidding. It's in my office. There's me. Now, I never wore a baseball cap. I have no idea why I'm wearing one in that picture. But there I am with my first place trophy. I had just won first place in a bowling tournament. Didn't happen too much after that. That's kind of a symbolic picture for me. This was taken in November of 1995, according to the back of the picture. And that first place trophy represents something for me. Things didn't turn around for me because I got first place trophies in bowling. But that's around the time in my life when I really started to have a number of key people in my life who treated me like first place. Even though I didn't measure up on any scale. It was around this time when my youth ministers would give me the opportunity to teach the Bible to my peers, even though I had no idea what I was talking about. I was given a pulpit and a microphone at age 17 and preached my first sermon. I don't know where the tape is. I don't think I want to see it. And they were willing to give me a pulpit, even though I didn't know what I was talking about. And I still don't, so thank you for giving me this. In high school, it was in one of those positions that many other people would make fun of. I was a drum major. But those 2 years of leadership in front of people where I don't know what it was, I had a safe opportunity to develop relationships with people, and I had an opportunity to help many, many other people. I had the opportunity to show other people the way. And whatever it was, I was finding a tremendous sense of self-worth through being anything like a drum major. All I had to do was not listen to what other people said about drum majors. I was given these roles when, truth be told, according to a list of qualifications, I had no reason being there. I had no business being there. But one of the lessons I learned from my youth ministers, and I remember her saying it, and I more remember her demonstrating it. She always told me that God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. In other words, you don't have to make a list of expectations and upright moral behaviors and abilities before God is fully, passionately interested in you. And the only reason I learned that is because there were key people in my life who were fully and passionately interested in me. They could have told me to be different. It wasn't until someone treated me differently that I saw the face of God smiling at me. Now, you may have heard me talk about some of the times after this. When I was in college, I was given many more of these leadership roles, and I was in these positions where I learned very valuable lessons about giving people space to use their gifts. One in particular was when I was on a traveling worship team. We traveled all around Virginia, and we went from church to church, living out of our suitcase, leading worship and working with youth groups. It was a blast. And we got to one church where there was this one boy who would always sit in the corner and wouldn't participate in anything we were doing. Now, what we were doing was music. We were doing the motions and the interpretive movements, and we were doing drama, and we were doing things like that. And he had no interest. And, in my mind, I was just kind of writing him off. Oh, what a pout-pout fish. What a bum. Why doesn't he just participate like everybody else? Well, later on in the week, someone had a camera, and he looked very interested in this camera, and someone let him have the camera. He took pictures the rest of the week of our week there in that church. And he took those pictures and made a slideshow. And on our last day there, we gathered for lunch, and we played that slideshow that he made. And I didn't think I was looking at the same boy. His face was lit up, smiling for the first time that week because he was given space to be who God had made him to be, while we were over here trying to make everybody conform to our expectations. I've seen it done. It was done for me, and it's made a difference every time. Grace. I don't think anyone has ever explained to me the dictionary definition of grace. We didn't do that in children's Sunday school. We didn't do it in youth group. Nobody explained to me what grace was. They showed me. It's not easy, but it has a powerful impact on people. So in a word, I was a pout-pout fish. And my turnaround came when people treated me differently. I really like this picture of the apple. Many of us feel like the bare apple core, especially many young people today. Feel like the bare apple core with really no worth other than to be tossed away. God works through people in our lives. And those people in our lives come and hold a mirror to us. But the reflection that they show us is not necessarily what we are, but what our value is. All of us, in a way, are the beaten up, eaten apple. Has there been someone in your life who has shown you the reflection of what you're worth, of the fact that God sees you as whole and ready to be loved, not down the road when you straighten yourself out? If I could summarize it in three things, the three things the adults in my life did for me: they accepted me, they showed me instead of telling me, and they gave me space where I experienced grace. The passages from today, the 2 Kings passage had the relationship between Elijah and Elisha. Elisha was the protege. And you notice Elijah has this cloak, and he rolls it up and he strikes the water, and the water parts. You're supposed to think of Moses when that happens. And then he's taken up, and then he leaves his cloak. We have to leave people our cloaks. He leaves his cloak. Elisha then can roll it up and strike the water and part the water. He had someone in his life to mimic, to emulate, someone who had invested in him. In the Acts passage, we were talking about Apollos. And Apollos did not know Jesus personally. He didn't have the qualifications, but he was given space to bring the message. And it says that when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God. And in verse 27, Apollos wanted to go to Achaia. The believers encouraged him and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. They prepared the way. They smoothed out the path a little bit, realizing that he still had to walk it. So the question I ask myself is, what would have happened? Where would I be if these people in my life had waited until I was straightened out? What would have happened if people had waited until I was morally upright? What if they had waited until they got a good report from my mother? They still might not. What if they had waited for me to be good enough? What if they had not shown me the reflection of what my value is? What if someone had not told me, God accepts you because you're called, not because you're qualified? What if I had only heard that God loved me, but didn't experience that love? You know, we here in the church have somehow got to figure out how to be the countercultural alternative to this world of competition, and where only the best get ahead, and where only the good ones are accepted. Jesus showed a very different way. You know in Matthew 11 where Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light"? Do you remember that? Do you know what he was saying there? An ancient rabbi's yoke was their particular interpretation of the law. And the burden was what was referred to as the requirements that their interpretation placed on their disciples. And Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." In a day when people would fight for a position as a disciple with a rabbi, Jesus said, "I've got room." Jesus was saying more than just a comforting statement. He was saying, in a word, I'm here to free you from religion and show you the way of grace. That's what Paul said in Romans 5. For God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Somehow, we've got to remember that grace has brought us to where we are. Somehow, we've got to call that to mind before we shun somebody else. Something I'm still guilty of to this day. We have to remember, as Jesus said, there's a log in our own eye, and we can't see straight to remove the speck in our neighbor's eye. Grace has brought us here, and it's grace that will make the difference in someone else's life.